Hey guys, this is Nunzio from RPP. Welcome back again to another webinar. Today we're going to talk about why in-season training is a must. First of all, to spend all that time in the off-season gaining good muscle weight, gaining mobility and strength, to let that all dissipate is a huge waste of both time and money. Not to mention, it's a high risk of injury involved. Injury risk goes up exponentially if we stop training during the in-season. I love this term, managing a controlled fall, that I saw Mike Reinold use one time, talking about how that fall happens, and if a power output and capacity drops below 80% during the in-season, performance is affected greatly. Some of the things we're going to talk about in this webinar is the need to continue to strength train, modifying arm care based off of hard throwing going on at this point, modifying med ball throws and rotational movements, frequency of training, modifying exercise selection, and also volume and intensity. And if you like what you see, please click the button and subscribe to our YouTube channel. This graph, also courtesy of Mike Reinold, shows us this controlled fall and tells us a lot. As you can see, the dotted line shows us when that 20% loss of strength and/or power happens. There is a direct correlation to less efficient performance and even worse, injury. While throwing a baseball does help increase arm speed and the soft tissue's resilience to stress, it can't be maintained unless you also are maintaining strength and mobility at the same time. For example, the body does need to remain strong and mobile to help dissipate that stress when coming down the mound. If this was the case, pitchers would be stronger at the end of a long season instead of crawling back into the gym in August, wondering why their arm hurts here and my arm hurts there, and their velo is down. Here's a question we often get around August or the beginning of the fall. How come so-and-so's velocity is up and mine is down from 92 to 87? Well, there are many reasons why velo can be down as the season progresses. However, often drops in performance at this time of the year are directly associated with that control fall we talked about earlier, and mostly due to strength and mobility deficits that can be avoided by training during the season. Whether it be strength, velocity, or speed, these abilities will only remain effective at a heightened level for a given period once the training for that specific adaptation stops. This chart on the right shows Issarin's training residuals and the specific components needed to excel in the field, as well as the amount of time before these specific traits begin to falter. Having said all this, I think in-season training is a bit misunderstood. It's very common to hear statements like, "How can I train 5 days a week in season? I don't have the time." Or, "I don't want to be sore from training." I can understand the concern for both of these comments, but let's address each. First off, gaining strength and maintaining strength are two different topics. Getting strong and mobile requires a rigorous regimen, usually 4 to 5 times a week. Maintaining strength and mobility requires a different regimen, only 1 to 3 times a week. In other words, in-season sessions can and should be designed to maintain strength and mobility without creating residual soreness due to the low intensity and lower volume. Now let's turn this conversation on its head. When it comes to in-season training, a better question to ask, other than can I really afford the time and money, is can you really afford not to? The impact of a lack of in-season training is cumulative. This means that by the end of the spring season, most or all of the off-season's hard work will have significantly dissipated, and that will be even worse during the carryover into summer ball in July and in June and July. We really need to finish the season as strong as we started if we want to carry over into playoff games. So now, with more knowledge in hand, let's review a few considerations for training during the season. 7 of the considerations for in-season training that we're going to talk about in this webinar today are the importance of continuing to strength train in season, no humeral movement and mobility work, that's arm care, maintain IR and upward rotation in our arm care, taking a look at how our med ball work on the non-dominant side only affects in-season play, modifying exercise selection and taking into consideration that there's a lot of hard throwing going on, reducing intensity and the volume of the workouts to avoid any next day stress placed on the body that could affect in-game play, and frequency. How many times a week is sufficient to maintain strength and power? And playing is absolutely not the same as training. While there are training adaptations that we cannot get in the gym the same way that we can from playing our sport, it's the same the other way around. For example, maintaining max strength in order to keep the glass large enough for all other types of strengths to fit into, and the ability to train force and power require loads that are not used in playing the sport. After all, we throw a 5-ounce baseball. But in order to throw that ball with velocity, as well as hit and run with less risk of injury, we have to address higher loads several times a week in the weight room. So, let's start taking a look at some of these parameters that should be included in a good in-season strength and conditioning program. First up is to continue your strength training in season. I think that we first have to clear up a few myths about sports performance and strength training. Throwing a baseball does not increase your arm strength, contrary to popular belief, and running bases is not strength training either. Playing your sport makes you better at playing your sport, period. It does not increase your strength. In fact, it causes fatigue and causes the body to break down. However, staying strong through in-season training has been shown to sustain key point indicators throughout the entire season. This includes maintaining throwing velocity, how fast you run, and how hard you hit the ball. And this could never be more important than at the end of the year when playoffs start. At this point, the strong will survive. There are two different adaptations that happen when playing a sport and training for that sport in the weight room. The bottom line is, if you want to perform at a high level, I think the answer is clear. You must continue strength training during the season. Number 2 is modifying mobility work, especially arm care. Up on the top left here, we can see this is a great thing to use off-season, our sideline windmill, where we're going overhead. But in the in-season, when hard throwing begins and the arm's overhead a lot, we're going to switch more to quadruped T-spine and get that arm out of less provocative positions. A pitcher can lose up to 5 to 10 degrees even after just one outing of IR due to the posterior cuff getting tight from decelerating the throw over and over, time and time again throughout the course of an inning and a game. As a result, we use side-lying ER to help stretch out the posterior cuff without pulling the scapula around on the rib cage. The fact that he's laying on his side, his weight is keeping the scapula anchored, so we're not doing it as we see guys do on the field standing. When you're standing and the scap is moving freely, we're actually pulling the scapula around on the rib cage, okay? We don't want to do that. We want to lay down, we want to keep the body stacked, we want to keep the head and neck relaxed on the roller, holding for 5-second holds. Baseball is a rotational sport, and this has many implications when it comes to med ball work. Although we'll never get our guys totally symmetrical, and nor should we try to, getting back some symmetry rotation-wise during the season can help avoid problems elsewhere throughout the chain. As a result, when heavier throwing starts late in the off-season and during the season, we move our rotational med ball work to the non-dominant side only. This is due to the fact that they're already rotating to the dominant side every day in gameplay. This can go a long way in preventing overuse injuries, especially to the lower lumbar from rotating so much to the throwing side. And what we're looking for here in this med ball shovel pass is we want to really focus on the transfer of the weight from the back to the front, and we want to let those hips go first. I always tell guys, let the hips deliver the ball. And try and keep that head and eyes even or behind the belly button throughout the course of the movement. Modifying strength training exercises to accommodate the increase in throwing volume is not only extremely important, it is a game changer. For example, moving from deadlifts to hip bridges in season to take a lot of weight out of a pitcher's hands will give the internal rotators, specifically the lats, a much needed break while helping to reduce a lot of that excess tone that can make it hard for a pitcher to get into layback. And not for nothing, but most of my guys tend to feel hip bridges in their posterior chain a lot more even than trap bar deadlifts. By keeping set ranges to no more than 12 to 15 total sets, this is not including cuff work, and intensities at or around 70 to 80%, I actually prefer even 70 to 75%, we can make sure we're not creating any residual soreness that may affect on-field performance 24 to 48 hours later. We'll generally use a 3 to 5 rep set for the lower body and an 8 rep set for the upper body, done with a 10 to 12 1 RM intensity. So we're not really wearing these guys out and they're not getting anywhere close to failure. One small note, conditioning work is not included. The athletes should already be getting plenty of this on the field. The reality is many student athletes between games, practices, and homework can't get to the gym more than 1 to 2 times per week. In this case, we use 2 full-body strength workout sessions per week for younger athletes and a 3 to 4 day high-low periodization model that we incorporate with our college and pro guys. With both pitchers and position players, we would optimally like to see them the day after throwing so we can consolidate most of their weekly training and playing stress within a 24-hour period. This allows them to have time to recover in between starts. We can also make sure that they're doing their mobility and soft tissue foam rolling work correctly by having some eyes on them a couple days a week in the gym. So to sum it all up, playing is absolutely not the same as training in the weight room. We want to finish as strong as we started, and in order to do that, we need to maintain our strength. If not, we'll get that controlled fall. So for all of you who put in the hours this off season, you should continue to maintain your strength and recovery abilities by getting 2 to 3 days a week of good in-season training. Remember to use low intensities such as like a 70 to 80 or 70 to 75% of your 1 rep max. That would be 0.50 to 0.60 meters per second for those of you using VBT. 2 to 3 sets of 3 to 5 reps lower and 6 to 8 reps of upper body. And be smart about our arm care and med ball work. We want to make sure we're not putting that arm in provocative positions during our arm care. Avoid a lot of overhead movements. It's unnecessary at this time of the season. And our med ball work, we're using one side only to try to get some of that rotational symmetry back because we're rotating so much to one side every day. Remember, I can't state it enough. You've worked too hard to let it slowly slip away through the in-season. So make sure you get in 2 to 3 days a week and get your in-season training, and it will reap huge benefits. So I want to thank you guys all for listening in once again on these webinars. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on Instagram. And be sure to like and follow us on our YouTube channel. Thanks and have a great day. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. If you're interested in our training material on pitching, hitting, or strength training, you can reach us at rocklandpeakperformance.com or on Twitter and Instagram at RPP_baseball. You can also call our front desk at 201-308-3363 or email us at rpp@rocklandpeakperformance.com. Also, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel on the way out.